everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. I know some of you are still getting connected to audio and getting your settings all ready to go, but we're going to get started with just a few announcements and introductions, and then we'll get into the content today. So I'm Hannah Curtis. I'm a coordinator with the North Metro Small Business Development Center. For any of you who aren't familiar with the SBDC, we offer free one-on-one consulting with our business experts. It's free and remote and a really great resource. So we'll be including some links in the chat about how to access that if that's something you're interested in for your business. And then we also offer free online programming like this webinar and also some online courses that we do. So some really great resources for your business, and we'll get into some of that later as well. We also want to give a big shout out and thank you to our partners with the City of Westminster Economic Development Department. They are co-sponsoring this session today, and they have a ton of great resources for businesses as well. So for those of you who are in the City of Westminster, they actually have a great 201 or a part 2 to this session coming up next week on Wednesday. They're at City Hall in Westminster. It'll be Wednesday morning next week, and I'll put a link to the event in the chat. So if you would like to meet Shelby and Stephanie with the Economic Development Department in Westminster in person next week and get to see the space there and find out some more resources, that's going to be a great time to follow up this session with that next week. So again, there'll be some more information about that in the chat there. And yeah, they just have a ton of great resources, so I encourage you to check that out. So today we're joined by Jesse Esparza. He's one of our lead SBDC consultants and has been with the SBDC for years and is a fantastic resource. So we're so happy to have him presenting the information to us today. And we're going to be talking about the steps you need to go through to start your business and what you need to be thinking about as you're opening your business, and some great resources there. So Jesse, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Hannah. Appreciate it. And it's really kind of exciting to see all of you here today. It just seems that hopefully, this is a good start for you all. I want to just emphasize that the startup essentials, or at least how to start a business in this case, is very general. So I know that there's a lot of different possibilities today that you are looking to start, but I want to make sure that you understand that what you're going to get is a general set of information, and it's going to apply to all of you. So I'll set up my PowerPoint here and get you all set up. And start the session. So again, if you need information above and beyond today, I know that Hannah and Michelle will provide you with that added information as we work through this process this morning. Just a real quick information, I've been with the North Metro SBDC since 2006. My background is actually an educator. My past life, I was a principal of a high school and an elementary school, retired in 2006, started volunteering, and actually kind of stumbled upon SBDCs and wanted to sort of begin to give back. And it's been exciting ever since. So this is a great resource that I think I'm hoping all of you have stumbled upon as well, to be able to utilize a resource for you to get your businesses going. So in case anybody wants some additional support one-on-one, I always like to put my name, my email, and also that you can contact the North Metro SBDC to get some additional resources. As Hannah said, we provide a lot of great resources for you. And even though this word says it's free, I want you all to know nothing is free in life. So one of the things that we require, at least, is for you to, even though we don't charge money, we want you to do your homework, continue to grow, continue to learn, and access information that is available to you very systematic to help your business grow. So we do, as Anna said, all the various different kind of trainings, and we have a lot of resources. For example, I have resources that you can actually do your financials without any real headaches. Or templates that already have cash flow projections. They have the sales forecast projections, and you can just pop in numbers and those kinds of things. Business plans. I think we carry 3 or 4 different kinds of business plans. You don't have to hype up your business plan, and we can help you do contacts. And even though we don't have any money to give you, we can connect you to the lenders. And so I personally work with probably 20 different of banks throughout the region, and always try to find one that works best for you. As you know, that really we are here to help you start, grow, and prosper. That's the intent of the SBDC. So today, what I'm going to do in the 60 minutes that we have, I'm going to try to give you information about the legal components of what you will need to establish in order to create a really good, solid, focused business in terms of the kinds of entities. And there are some basic understandings that you're going to have to work through. I think branding is, the heart of the business in terms of what you need to understand to get clients. And I don't imply that branding is just the business cards and your logo, but in fact, some of these other components that we'll spend a little bit about. Also, if you can understand that a business can truly be successful when you have good organizational structure to it, the probability of success is much higher when you establish a good organizational structure. And so that I'm going to give you a little bit of details as well. And then, even though we are not accountants, I can give you some general information about taxes that I think will give you an insight of what you'll have to deal with and how you can work with the city of Westminster. So here I like to just kind of awaken you a little bit. And most of you that are on today's website here today is that you probably are small business owners. You're starting out with a home-based business. Most of you are going to own your businesses, and there's really some good possibilities that you're family owned and you're the founder. And so there's some really good successful possibilities. If in fact you look at the right side of the success factor, and that is that we know from statistics that first year businesses die at the rate of about 93%, believe it or not. And that's why SBDCs do this, is because we want you to be successful. And most businesses that don't get educated in terms of the legal components of the branding, the organization, and the taxation, they end up sort of falling out, and the first year they have a very low success rate. But the more you educate and the longer you stay in the focus, the better success you'll have. Not to say that you won't be successful. All I'm saying is that we hope that you defy the rate of failure in a small business startup by working through the process of getting the information that you need and the process to get well defined with your business. So let me start with the legal structures. And when you think about the legal structures in a business, there are basically 4 components that you will have to be a bit aware of how these work. And so when you think about these 4 components, you can be a sole proprietor, a general partnership, a limited partnership, a limited liability. And there are various different kinds of limited liability. So you've got to be a little bit educated into the kind of limited liability, if that's what you're looking to do, and how it's going to serve you. Then, of course, there's corporations, and a limited liability company is a form of corporation. It's just, it has some limited options to it. So let's get started with that process. The first one is the sole proprietor. And remember, a sole proprietor is basically a very easy entity. It's, single owners. Basically, usually we call sole proprietors DBAs, doing business as. And the positive things about a sole proprietor are that they're very inexpensive, and anyone over the age of 18 can basically become a sole proprietor. And actually, in the state of Colorado, if you sell any products and or you sell any of your services and you get money for it, then the state of Colorado determines you to be a sole proprietor. That's how easy it is. You don't have to register if you don't create a pseudonym or a DBA. And it's really the concept of a pass-through tax. And what that means is that the business that you start is never going to pay taxes. But in fact, whatever profits the sole proprietor would make in their business, it passes through the business onto your personal tax bracket, and you pay the taxes. So that's how easy a sole proprietor can be. Now, detriments to a sole proprietor are really in that it's really anything that you do in your business is going to fall right back on your responsibility. So somebody sues you, you have a bankruptcy, basically you're the one that owes that money. And if you get sued, then they're going to come back and also, if they win the suit, you have liability for your home, for your vehicle, any kind of assets that you have are going to be included in that whole process. And that's what unlimited liability means. The other part is that the business can't really carry on. I always use the example that, Sears has been around, or was, not anymore, but Sears was around for, gosh, what, 30, 40, 50 years. But if Sears would have been a sole proprietorship, it never would have had the opportunity to carry its business name to another individual or another family. So basically, sole proprietors can only be very simple to the individual. When the individual passes, you can't pass on that business to another individual. Also, that, as I said, because it's a pass-through tax, that it is in fact the responsibility of the owner to pay the taxes. So that's really the simplicity of a sole proprietor. Very easy, very simple to work. You don't have to even get separate bank accounts. You can do it on your own personal liability and be able to create that account under your name. But it has some definitely detriments. The general partnership, I would say everything that I said about the sole proprietorship, I will echo the same for the general partnership. The only difference is that it in fact has more than one individual. So there are some very positive things about a general partnership. One is that you don't have to make all the decisions. Basically, when you have partners, those individuals with the strengths of, say, marketing are going to be focused in the marketing, and those that have the strengths in financial. So for example, Hannah and I are in business. She has great experience and strengths in finances. She would be the boss of finances, and I have great experiences in marketing, then I'm the boss. And so those are the key components to a good general partnership. And ultimately, we can also bring additional capital. We can bring additional individuals into the mix. And we don't need all of the complexity that some of the other entities have to deal with in terms of some of the legal aspects of the documents. Again, the detriments are the same as the sole proprietor in that any decision that I make, Hannah would have the same consequence to that decision. If I make a bad decision, then the entire business is going to fault, and Hannah would not have any recourse to do that. We do not have any kind of liability protection, and as well as looking at the process, then if one of us, of the partners, decides to get out, then it becomes a sole proprietorship. We have the responsibility to the taxes ourselves. It's a pass-through tax like the sole proprietorship. And therefore, what's really important about a general partnership, if any of you are thinking about trying to work a general partnership, the key is to establish a good operating agreement between you and the other individuals. That at least creates a good solid foundation to how you're going to run this business. Then you have the limited liability company. So herein lies now the difference. In a sole proprietor and a partnership, you don't have to actually register those as long as you don't have any DBA names. But a limited liability company does have to be registered in the state of Colorado. It separates itself from you, the individual. And one of the most important components of a limited liability company is that it does protect your assets that are personal assets from business assets. And that is really important. And so limited liability companies can be single or multiple owners. And I always, try to emphasize to business owners, if why would you want to be a partnership when you can be a limited liability partnership? It has some really good opportunities for you to separate all your assets, personal, from your business. And if for whatever reason you would get sued or you go bankrupt, things stay separate. So those are really important components of a limited liability company. The owners are called members. And so anyone that's in the LLC is an operating member of that LLC. And that's why you create a article or a document that's called the Article of Organization. Once you have established yourself as a limited liability company, you do have to follow Colorado statutes and IRS statutes, which means that you have to separate your personal budget from your business budget. You have to keep a running cash flow process on a monthly basis so that the IRS can at least document, and you document that you are in fact going to pay estimated taxes on the profits of the income that you create. And what's really important is you cannot combine any of the properties into a common fund, such as taking your personal assets and using those for business versus business for personal. There is, some real good opportunities that come from limited liability companies. And that is that you are protected as long as you do not commingle. I want to emphasize this really, really important process, in that as soon as you start buying any equipment materials with your personal credit card, once you become a limited liability company and you're registered with the state of Colorado, you are now commingling. And the IRS says you have just now become a sole proprietor. So you got to be sure not to commingle. In other words, anything that you do with business, you have to use business money, and anything you do personal, you have to use personal money. Limited liability companies can have as many members as you want in there, again, as long as you have an operating agreement. And all the members are protected on the basis of the fact that it is, in fact, a protected entity that separates them from their personal assets. If, in fact, the limited liability company wants to become a corporation, then basically there are forms that you complete that then it's very simple to treat yourself as a corporation and ultimately work through the limited liability process. Now, limited liabilities do have some detriments, and that is that they could be costly because the more individuals you have in a limited liability company, most likely you're going to need attorneys and accountants. Because I would say, as an example, if Hannah and I were in a limited liability company, and Michelle, us three, and if I made the decision that I was going to get 75% of the profits, I'm sure they would say, no, let's just get an attorney to set that whole process up. So you see, it could be very expensive. And also how we do taxes could be very expensive as we work through that process. So an accountant might be someone that we want to hire as well. Another aspect of the LLC is that the IRS is going to treat you as a sole proprietor based on your taxes only. And that is something for you to be aware of. It's only the fact that when you have a sole member, one person that's an LLC, then most likely the IRS will see you as a sole member. That's it. And it's very simple. If you have more than one individual in an LLC, then that is going to be more complex and it's a little bit different. So overall, the limited liability company is a great entity. It looks like, it feels like a sole proprietor and a partnership, but in fact, it's a separate entity. And that's why it has some really good in terms of what the sole proprietors and the partnerships don't have in the process of giving you some protection as long as you don't commingle. By the way, and so I do want to emphasize that with the sole proprietor, the partnership, and the limited liability company, you cannot be employees of those kinds of companies. You can only withdraw money out from your business accounts as owners. Corporations, when you think in terms of a corporation, it really is, again, the more complex, the more you get into these type of entities. They are, in fact, separate legal entities. And in a corporation, you must have a board of directors, and you also must have a set of bylaws. And therefore, you would be filing the articles of incorporation. And ultimately, you have to keep good records on a yearly basis for the IRS. So definitely in a corporation, they're based on shares. And so rather than like the LLCs and the other entities, the percentage of ownership is really based on the number of shares that you own and ultimately the process of how you work those shares through the operating agreement. The thing about a corporation is that they have much more protection in terms of the concepts of how anyone can actually gain information about the corporation. And unless you have something that's pretty egregious in terms of liability or breaking the law, most likely you won't be able to pierce the corporate veil of a corporation.
Jesse, there's a quick question.
Sure.
Melody's asking if you can switch entities. Like, for example, could you go from an LLC back to a sole proprietor?
And it'll cost you money. Every time that you do anything on the Secretary of State, they'll charge you money. But yeah, you can do that, and with the intent that you also have to follow it with the documentations that are required once you move from one entity to the other. The other thing that I think is important is to understand that if and when you change an entity, remember the corporations and LLCs operate on a yearly annual January to December. And so when you change, you have to keep those records separate for each of those entities. So that could be a little complex. You know, if I have an LLC from January to March, and then I switch over to a corporation, I go from April to December, I have two sets of records. That's really going to be important to follow.
Great, thank you.
Sure. So think about the corporations in terms of two separate entities in a sense that when we talk about corporations, you have a C Corp and then we have an S Corp. S Corps are fairly simple concepts in corporation descriptions because they're a little bit more simple to operate, less costly, and they also have the option to be pass-through tax entities. They are definitely very much more complex that the IRS will require various different required documents and follow up the process to be able to sustain the information that the IRS is going to need. So that I think is going to be important when you think about which entity you want to be. If you are going to do an S Corp, you have to file the 2553 that is going to give you that status. And also an S Corporation within 75 days, once it starts, and it's only up to March. You cannot start a corporation after, I mean, you can start them anytime, but you have to file in order to sustain that corporation through a document. S Corps can be pass-through tax entities. They are all also much based on shareholders, and each shareholder is taxed individually on the basis of how many shares they have. Again, you might want to consider, if you're going to be an S Corp, to obtain the services of an attorney or an accountant. Remember that a S Corp has some great advantages. They're not as complex as a C Corp. They have a little bit more protection than an LLC. You don't have to pay corporate taxes. You can do a pass-through tax, and so usually when you think about a corporation, it's going to be taxed at about 21%, whereas an LLC, a sole proprietor and a partnership are taxed at about 30%. It divides, again, your type of expenses and income to the shareholders. So that's another real positive thing. You have about 5 or 6 shareholders. You divide all of that to each of the shareholders based on what the operating agreement would be. It does create some great liability protection, and again, as corporations have a better opportunity to raise capital through the stocks that they might be able to sell, depending if it's a public or private. The detriments obviously are that the corporations have a little bit more complexity, and you only have, with an S Corp, you only have one set of stock, which is called a C stock. Usually C corporations have A and B. S corporations only have one C stock type of purchasing. Again, as I said, they can be costly, but they have some fairly good protection. So I know that was quick and fast, but here's my point. What's important through this whole process, and as I told you, this is just very general. We do recommend that you talk to an accountant or an attorney when you are deciding on an entity. But the questions I think that are important, who are the owners, and who's going to be in control, and who's going to manage the business, and how are you going to obtain the revenue that you're looking for, And are you looking at taxes relative to this type of entity? All of these questions, I think, are important for you to discuss before you make a decision, because there's tax implications and there's also liability implications. And the kind of business that you're going to run ultimately can become very complex the more you have success with it. And therefore, you want to have some great protection for it. So something to think about as you work through this whole process.
Thanks, Jesse. There's just a couple more questions about entities, if that's all right.
Sure.
One was about commingling. If you find that you accidentally commingled funds on like one or two transactions, is there something you need to do, or how would you handle
Well,
that?
my answer is stop doing it. You can't go back. So just stop doing it. Remember that if you don't get audited after 5 years, then you have no worries to go. If you get audited, basically you started the business. Usually I've had clients that have been audited and they are very honest, and the IRS says, just stop doing it. And as long as you're not, being egregious to the whole process, they understand that new startups have some of those issues.
Great. Good to know. Thank you. And then the other one is, could you be both an S Corp and an LLC?
Good question. Well, actually, an LLC can be an S Corp, and you can treat the LLC as an S Corp, or you can treat an S Corp as an LLC. That is going to be a question that you've got to work with your accountant on. That's my general overview. Again, I'm not an accountant, but I can tell you that that is a good process for you to go through, depending on what you're going to do in that business that may require you to be a corporation based on the liability protection that you need, or the number of individuals that you have in there. But yes, the question is yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Those are all our questions for now.
Okay. So I want to just go through the 6 steps. And this is important as you look at the process to get yourself established as a business. And I emphasize it's that you have to follow the steps in order. The first thing that you do to start your business is you go to the Secretary of State. I won't do it because of limited time. This is usually a 2-hour session. I'm going to try to get it done in one. But please understand that the sole proprietor is going to cost you $25, partnership $25, the LLC is going to cost you $50, and the corporation is going to cost you $50. You're going to get a registered number, and you're also going to establish your documents so that you have a legitimate business in the state of Colorado. Once you do that, then you go to the IRS, and depending a sole proprietor and a partnership, you can use your Social Security. An LLC and a corporate entity must use an EIN. And here's the thing that's important to state. When you go to the IRS, then you don't pay any money for a EIN. If you go to Google and you put in that you want to get an EIN, you're going to get companies that are going to present themselves, and they're going to charge you $150, $200, $300. They're not scams. They're businesses and very legitimate, but you're going to have to pay. So just keep in mind, you don't have to pay for an EIN if you go through the IRS. And it only takes you 5 minutes to get that. You're going to need a Social Security, but then you'll never use your Social Security again, because your EIN becomes the business Social Security. The third step is for you to obtain the Department of Revenue. And I'll get into a little bit later about the taxes. But if you are going to be a business that is going to sell products, then you will need a CR0100, or you can go to colorado.gov and sign up online with the biz, what they call the, I think it's the website for the colorado.gov is I can't remember, biz taxes, but it's online for the colorado.gov site for you to register. If you're a service, you don't need to have sales tax. The fourth step is going to be for you to obtain your business license through the city of Westminster or whichever city that you are living in, if you're a home-based business. If you are a brick and mortar, then you will need to register wherever that brick and mortar building is within that city. And that's really basically for you to solicit anywhere in the state of Colorado. Most cities are going to charge you between $35 and $50 for a business license for you to solicit. Then the fifth step is for you to get a bank account, and therein lies the separation that you can create for the type of business that you're working. And then, of course, the sixth step, and it's not one that is required by law, but we always say it's better to have the ability to sleep at night by getting business liability insurance that will help you run the business in case you have some problems. So those are really the 6 steps. And I think if you work them in that order, you'll be good.
There's a quick question about registering for locations.
Okay.
Someone had just asked that they registered their LLC in New Mexico, but now they're running the business out of their home in Colorado. Will they need to register anything with Colorado, or since they're registered already where it was created in New Mexico, is that okay?
You're in trouble, buddy. No, not really. No, seriously, what's going to be important, whoever that is, you have to now go to the Secretary of State of Colorado and register as a foreign entity if you're going to continue to operate that business in New Mexico. So the state requires you to pay taxes in the state where you are living. And again, that's an accountant, I think, situation that you would be best to get an accountant to work with you on establishing. If you're going to keep the business in New Mexico, then you have to establish it as a foreign entity. My recommendation is if you are going to run it in Colorado, for Colorado, dissolve it in New Mexico and open it in Colorado.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so I just provide this overview because I want you to all understand that there's a bunch of different kinds of insurance that you can get for a business. You can get insurance for buildings, for furniture, for machinery, for payroll insurance, various cargo, inventory. All of these will be kinds of insurance that you can get depending on your business. I always say for startups, you really may just need to start with general business liability insurance. This protects you against losses or injury in wherever you're at. If you're a home-based business, it will at least help the fact that you've got insurance that's separate from your home, because your home insurance is not going to protect you if you have a home-based business. If you have products, then you may want to get product liability insurance that helps you at least give a safe forum to your product. And if anybody gets sick by it, something occurs with it, at least you've got insurance to cover it for you. If you have a service, then you may want to get completed operation insurance based on the service that you provide and the contracts that you put together. Now, most insurance companies are going to put all these 3 together, and they'll sell you the 3 as one, and many times it's cheaper than trying to get all 3 separate. Just something to think about. Then there's all these other type of insurance. Again, depending on how big your business is getting, you may need property insurance once you have, a brick and mortar. Remember that your home insurance, if you are a home-based business, does not cover your property of your home and any of your belongings. Business interruption insurance, again, in the state of Colorado, it's not something you have to have, but again, with many of the disasters that occur, could be something that you might want to consider. And then, of course, the business type that you run, you may need to look at errors and emissions, but these are all different kinds of insurances that keep your business moving in the right direction. Okay, so think about this whole process of business as a focus towards what are you going to do in terms of this business, and who are you going to sell to, and how successful can your business be? Well, it's all based on your branding. So remember that branding is a communication process that creates a sense of value for who you are versus what your business does. And so think about branding as a communication link to your target population. And it's really the important pieces of this business that you're going to do that is going to clarify the kind of brand that you're going to establish. So branding is going to be important. Think about the values. Establish a set of values that you are going to represent, but also establish a set of values that your website is going to represent. You may not be around, but people are going to look at your website, and so that's when your website or your business is communicating values. You want to establish a mission statement that reflects who you are and what services you're going to provide me, the customer. Remember that the goals that you create not necessarily and always are your goals, but the goals that you have for me, the customer. When I pay you $50, $75, $25 for a product or a service, then I want something in return. And so the question really is, what are you going to give me in return for the money I give you? That's where goals come in. And that's what branding is all about in terms of how successful you can be to work through the process of getting more clients. So that's why we say marketing is an important aspect. And once you have a brand, then you can market. So it's about keeping in touch with those components that are very easily out there, also being competitive to other businesses. So keeping in touch is about connections, about the success that you're going to have. And so you want to have the ability and the strategy to target the right customer. And by that, I mean that market research can give you a focus. So if I have $1 and I want $10 in return, then I need to know who those clients are that want what I have. If I don't do that, then $1 is just down the drain. It may never bring me back anything in return. And I usually see that because clients are focused on what their needs are, and I have to know what their needs are. Remember that marketing, in terms of finding your target, is a way for you to research and establish some good data. You can get good data. The US Census Bureau today is very sophisticated. If I had more time, I would show you the great resource. And I really encourage all of you, just go to the uscensus.gov site. And I want you to access the information that you can actually go to the neighborhood where you're going to sell and find out about individuals and their income, their background, what they like, what they don't like, what they're looking for. There's so much information that the US Census.gov site can create these days that it's a world of resource. The city of Westminster also carries data that will help you to determine the demographics of some of the places where you want to sell your products and services, and what some of those demographics might be to support what you're doing in business. That's research that is called secondary research. The other type of research is called primary research. And if I go to a corner next to King Soopers and I just stand there and I watch what people are buying, I'm actually collecting primary research. If I start asking random, individuals the same question, and I ask the same exact question and collect information, I am actually collecting primary research. Very important information, and that's another way that you can determine whether you have a product that people want and or are going to buy by these two components of secondary and primary research. So what does that do? It actually brings you to a target, and it gives you the ability to determine whether you have a competitive advantage over your competition. I would suspect that all of you here today who are starting a business, you can be assured that you already have competition out there. So the question is, can you create a competitive advantage from those who are already in business doing the same thing that you're doing? And that's the key. What do you have that's of value that they don't have? Key information, and that's what's going to bring you clients. So ask yourself some of these questions, okay? In terms of what does your competition provide? And what is it that my customers want that they're not getting from your competition? And I say, go shop that competition. Ask the questions. It's okay to ask any questions about, what you might think would be something your clients might want. And you start analyzing and you look at this marketing and determine then what your value is as related to your competitors. As I said, oh, go ahead.
Jesse, I wondered if I could just interrupt real quick with a few questions before we move on to this section. There was a question going back to the business interruption insurance. Do you happen to know if that covers pandemics?
Actually, it doesn't. We went through that pandemic, and unless individuals had some other kind of insurance, but business interruption would not cause some of those kinds of situations that we don't know are gonna come up, like a pandemic.
Sure. Great, thank you. And then the other question is someone wondering if the SBA offers help with 501c3s.
The SBA does not offer, but the SBDCs do.
Yeah.
So really, when you think about, yes, we provide you with support in establishing a nonprofit and all the procedures that you want to do to get your nonprofit to be successful.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so as I told you earlier, organizational structure is very important to a business. And when you think about how important it is that usually what you've got to do is you've got to establish a good record keeping process. You have to collect good data. You have to manage and plan your business. And then you have to analyze all of these. And that's why organizational structure. So, when you break these down in these 4 components, believe me, it doesn't become that complex. So my point is, think about record keeping and data collection. remember that when you collect data, it's about the decisions that you're going to make, and it's about the reporting that you've got. I mean, IRS is going to need information, the city is going to need information, the state is going to need information, and I'm sure a couple other agencies. So it keeps your information in hand with those agencies. A filing system is great for you to have, and organize it with hard online as well as the hard copy system. It's always good to have both. It's important to have proof of those things that you cannot expect are going to occur, like fires, like the auditor. And those kinds of things are going to happen at some point, and it's good for you to have at least preparation set up. Remember that part of organizational structure really is having good financial documents. So, I start with the cash flow statement. We think cash flow is probably, if you do nothing else as a startup, create a monthly cash flow statement so that you know where you're going, whether you're going to have enough revenue to continue your business next month, how much you're going to need for next month based on your cash flow, as well as whether you have the ability to take money out for yourself. Income statements, usually, again, those, as you grow the businesses, those will become important because those of you that have products are going to begin to show how much those products are costing you and the cost of goods that you have to buy in order to sell your product. So that becomes a little bit more complex, but in fact, it's still important because it is a process that gives you the comparison of the revenues, expenses, and the profits that you have the ability to make in a business. The balance sheet, okay, if you don't pull out of money as a startup, you probably don't need a balance sheet for the next 6 months. As soon as you start putting money into your business, the balance sheet begins to provide you a sense of whether you have assets or you have liabilities, which is another piece of whether your business is being successful or not. Management in a business is very critical. So you're managing your business, so you've got to be planning and you've got to set up your business in terms of how much finances do you need to set up. You're always kind of planning this whole process around, for example, a quarter system or a 6-month system or a yearly system, but you want to plan financial affairs of where your money is going, what you have to do to spend it, where, and so that your assets can continue to grow. When can you have employees? Can you ultimately have the money for employees? So those are key questions that management is going to provide you the ability once you start controlling it and operating it. So the other part is monitoring and controlling your operation. So you keep records and then you produce and you establish your controls, you analyze your finances, and then you work with your team. Every single business, those of you that are one-person business, consider yourself to have 5 individuals as your team. You should have an accountant, or at least know an accountant. You should have at least an attorney, and maybe even have a retainer that you have for an attorney. You should have a bank individual, a banker that you know that you work with. It would be good for you to have an insurance agent that you work with. And it's good for you to have a business consultant like an SBDC counselor that you can always count. They're going to be there to give you advice on your business affairs. And there's probably one more. I always say, okay, there's 5, but really there's 6 nowadays. And that would be the IT individual. You got to have, your internet working, and you got to have your computer working these days. So another individual to be part of your team. So when you think about the organizational structure, think about this whole concept of being very simple. Don't get too complex as a startup. It's the RAC system: reliable, accurate, and consistent. IRS says if and when they audit you, as long as they know that you are organizing it and they can read it, That's all they want. And the same thing as you work your business, as long as you know how to organize it and it's working for you, you don't have to get really complex. I always try to emphasize, as a small startup, and if you're not going to make a whole lot of money initially, don't go out and get into QuickBooks. It's good to learn the system of finances by your Excel sheets on a monthly basis. You're learning the process, and then you work through QuickBooks. If you already know QuickBooks, great. But QuickBooks is a complex system that is really good, but it takes time to learn. Business taxes. I want you to all read. Remember, we're not CPAs and attorneys, but we just give you general information about what you need to understand about taxes. If you are a startup and you're going to be selling any tangible products, then you're going to need a sales tax license. And the Colorado retail license is the same as the sales tax license. If you're going to be purchasing products for resale, you may want to obtain a wholesale license. You can get that information through the Colorado tax rates, and that'll give you information about how much you have to collect in taxes. Some of you are going to be in cities where if it's a home-based, it's a home rule city, meaning the city and Westminster collects their own taxes, then you're going to have to create a form that you send taxes to the state of your sales tax as well as to the city of Westminster. A use tax is anything that you do not pay a tax on and you're going to use for your business. So in example, you buy a computer through Office Max. You tell the agent, I'm a business, you give them your EIN and they don't charge you tax. Well, the city is going to say, did you buy anything that you use for your business that you didn't pay taxes on? You have to inventory that, and they're going to want to collect their share of that tax. That's called a use tax. Sometimes the same thing occurs with property taxes as well. Anyone that sells products in the state of Colorado and does it through the internet, if you sell products to individuals in the state of Colorado, then you need to collect taxes and also send them in to the state and to your city. If you sell any products outside of the state of Colorado, right now the state IRS says you do not have to collect taxes from anyone outside of the state of Colorado when you're selling that. And of course, then there's, the other kind of tax is income tax. Anything that you consider to be profit, once you determine after your expenditures, then you're going to need to pay income taxes. And of course, the IRS also is going to be responsible for, giving you the details of what you have to do with the LLCs and or the S corps, depending on the kind of tax that you're going to be paying. As I said, of course, the LLCs 30% on the profit, and corporations, S&Cs, 21%. This is a good publication. I would recommend that you, as a startup, download this publication. It's a business taxes, and it has all of this great information that I think will be something of a resource for you as you work your business. And it's got a great, very up-to-date information for all of you who are in the state of Colorado doing or selling products and services. Also, there's some really good resources from the IRS. If you are deducting your expenses, then this is a good, obviously good website through the IRS, deducting business expenses. It tells you all of what you can deduct very good. And also the 535, publication 535, they usually update it every year, which gives you information about what can you deduct in your business. If you're a home-based business, then that's also good information. IRS has some really good information, believe it or not. And they can also give you information about if you run a home-based business, what you have the ability to deduct as a business, the home-based business. Okay, finally, we're going to talk about taxes. I'm sorry, business plans. And what I want to just emphasize real quick on this is that you have the ability to obtain loans. If you are going to need a loan, then you will need what they call a pro forma business plan. A pro forma business plan has all of these components. The lender wants to know whether you've done market research, if you've done what kind of business model you have, the marketing plan. All of these are going to be important for you to put together. We at the SBDC I do these every day and help businesses when they're getting a loan to work through these steps of the pro forma business plan. Pro forma means that you have at least 3 to 5 years financial projections. And usually, as I said, it has all of these components that you will need to address for the lender to at least have the high probability of giving you a loan. If you're not going for a loan, I recommend that you at least create a 1-year, what I call an action plan. For a startup, it's get your brand together, get the goals that you have for customers, develop your activities, and do a sales forecast for that year so that you have something to go by that you're going to address on a quarterly basis, which gives you direction. And rather than operating by the seat of your pants, it helps for you to go forward and look at what decisions you need to make based on your business. Remember that really it's about, looking at the action plan based on your mission, your goals that it accomplishes what you're going to do for that year. And why do businesses fail? Well, I can tell you after working with about 1,000 businesses in my, 15-year process with SBDCs, that I can see almost every one of these has a factor in why businesses fail. And it's usually not one of them. It's a combination of these that ultimately we see why it's failing. It's important to lower your risk. Get help. Remember, I said SBDCs are free to you. And so use the services of an SBDC consultant. I think I am one of about probably 8 consultants in North Metro and wherever you might be in other areas. We're all professionals, and I think we can give you a very good process of continuing to educate what your needs are. So again, as we said, there are very many, I think, very different kinds of resources that we can provide as you work through the components of the business on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. So here I would just say these are a lot of the different kinds of things that we would provide. I know that you can get those as you work through one-on-one as you get registered with SBDC. Okay, any questions? I know that I said that was very quick.
Yeah, that was so helpful. Thank you, Jesse. That was fantastic. And as a reminder to everyone, we'll be sending out the resources and materials this afternoon so you can review everything since it was a pretty quick session today. I know we were able to get to a lot of questions during the session, but if you do have any last minute ones you want to pop in the chat, please do so. I know there was one actually that I missed earlier on. I know you said a couple times that services do not have a sales tax. Is that true for the childcare industry, like childcare as a service? Does that not have a sales tax?
That's partly correct. Childcare services, some have, do have sales tax because of the rental of the building, or maybe buying certain products that they use for their use and operation for the kids. So they're still using some of those items that they have to buy, and it might be a use tax that they have to collect, and therefore they probably still have to get a sales tax license.
Got it. Good to know. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yep.
Great. Well, it looks like those are all of our questions. And I know we are just a few minutes over. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time today and for attending. And thank you, Jesse, so much for putting this all together and for presenting it to us so clearly and answering all of our questions. We really appreciate it. And just want to give one more reminder about part 2 of this session next Wednesday for all of you who are specifically in the city of Westminster. There's some links to that event in the chat, and will also be in the follow-up email. To register, you can just email Shelby Wood. So that email will also be in her email address will be in my follow-up this afternoon. So you'll have all of that in one place. But yeah, please make use of the SBDC and of your city resources. We are here for you and want to help your business succeed in your startup phase. So thank you all for joining, and we hope you have a great afternoon.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you. Hope to see you soon at an SBDC near you.